Nameless, and I'm going to be the person helping you with your book selection. Now, do you have a particular book in mind that you wanted to get? No, excellent. My perfect chance to influence your mind then. So we have an assortment of genres that you can choose from and topics that you can choose from. The first one that I spot right here on the top of the stack, considering how we don't really keep things organized, not my fault. I mean, I would hire someone to keep it more organized and, you know, within the Dewey Decimal System, but it's just, no thank you. So, the first book that I spot on the top of the stack is a book based on, it's more of a biography book, based on the romance between Pamela Corson and Jim Morrison, written by Patricia Butler. Now, with this book, there is a book that we also have on the market in this bookstore called I'm With the Band, which is, you know, kind of scandalous, but, I mean, it's a book. Knowledge and information should be scandalous and controversial. I mean, that's how your opinions kind of get questioned and molded and whatnot. But the reason why this one's a bit scandalous is because it's written by a groupie from the 60s who illustrates her relationships with different men in a tasteful manner. Now, with this book, I don't believe there's any mention of Pamela Des Barres, but in this book there is a mention of Jim Morrison, this character, where Pamela Corson ended up going to Jim Morrison's home because they were living within the same neighborhood, and she ended up, you know, seeing Jim Morrison. But when she was visiting, Pamela Corson ended up dropping by, and Pamela Corson was obviously very offended because, you know, Jim Morrison wasn't the most faithful, and she ended up asking her to leave, and that was basically the end. So, at least from what I could remember, I don't know if they ended up continuing an affair, but I don't think she had a continued affair with Jim Morrison. She had a continued affair with Keith Moon, I think Jimmy Page, but Jimmy Page had an affair with everyone. I mean, he even had an affair with a 14-year-old girl, no, that's Sable Star. No, I think he might have had a relationship with her, but no, the one I'm thinking about is Lori Maddox. I think that was her name. Lori Maddox. Lori Maddox rings a bell. Nonetheless, these two books I would highly recommend being bought together. This one, let's see. This one I know has there are some pictures inside of this book. For example, let's see if I can find Jim. Okay, here he is. Right here is Jim Morrison wearing a cowboy boots, and it's a black and white picture, a black and white photo. And then here is another photo of the Doors in their earlier days. There are some highlightings in the book, considering how it is a used bookstore, but that shouldn't deter you from purchasing the book, considering how highlighting kind of emphasizes the points that other people found fascinating. So maybe you can share their opinion and thank them for having highlighted those points. And then in the middle section there are some colored pictures. Here's some with Jim and Pamela. Pamela technically becoming his wife, though not officially, even though she was regarded as one in the end, legally. Here's another photo of Jim and Pamela with their group within Pamela's fashion boutique. And here's Jim and Pam once again. I must admit, Pamela's fashion was just spot on, as was Pamela's Des Barres. Pamela Corson's and Pamela Des Barres' fashion sense was just spot on. I mean, look at this hair. Is this not fabulous? And there are some photos scattered throughout this book. As you can see, these are some photos of Pamela with the men she had a relationship and engaging with. And it is quite an interesting book, to be, if I do say so myself. Here's some more photos. And some more photos. And some more photos of her earlier days. Let's see, during the 50s. Or is that during the 50s? Early 60s could be. Unless we also have Wonderful Tonight by Patty Boyd. I was going to say Patty DuBois, but Patty Boyd, who illustrates her relationships with George Harrison, Eric Clapton, and her own personal life, of course. On the market as well, if you'd like to purchase that book with the books that I just showed you. Now to move on, let me just see. We also have Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. The print within the book is quite small compared to other ones, and the page length is 419 pages, but it is a classic, I must say so, and it is quite a great novel detailing the course of life and change in a young woman's life, like the events following it, because it's quite interesting. It is quite interesting. It follows a girl named Tess of the D'Urbervilles who ends up finding out that, Tess of the I forgot her original name, but Tess of the D'Urbervilles is the name that she realizes is her original name, passed within her ancestry, but she has a different name because, you know, with the passage of time, her last name started getting, you know, changed. But in fact, her name was Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and when they realized that her name was Tess of the D'Urbervilles, she ends up trying to find family who also have that last name, and the family that she finds is actually quite wealthy, so she ends up visiting them, trying to claim the kinship with them, and from there, her life just starts unwinding and just going in so many different directions, and it's just an interesting book to see how, you know, the world can treat people sometimes, particularly a young woman during that time. So it is quite an interesting book. The language is a bit antiquated, of course, but once you get over that, it is quite an interesting read. So I'll leave that to the side. That could be one of the classic sections. That is a classic novel, so I'll start piling up the classics in a different pile for you. Now, let's see. Speaking of classics, we also have a selection by F. Scott Fitzgerald. We have his most popular book, The Great Gatsby, of course. It is it's 228 pages long, and the print of it, let's see, is quite decent. It's not that difficult to swallow. You know, you're not going to be spending 2 or 3 minutes on a page. It should take you like a minute or less even. It does seem quite small. And towards the end of this book, a nice little detail they have is that it also provides a study guide for each individual chapter to reflect upon your reading in case you're choosing this book for school. Now, another work we have by Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald is this book, Afternoon of an Author. I have yet to read this book, but if it's by F. Scott Fitzgerald, it should be quite interesting. I've heard it's more of like a memoir sort of book, but I might be mistaken. However, if you decide that you want to take a chance on a book you hardly know anything about, then this would be one of those books, considering how I don't know what it's about. Now, I will be leaving the selection of F. Scott Fitzgerald to the side over here. Now, what's another book? Let's see. We do have a selection of biographies as well. One biography we have right here is a book by, well, not by, it's by James Gleick, but it's based upon Richard Feynman. It chronicles his life and the process of his career and whatnot, his intellectual career, not just his career as a physicist, but also as just the way his mind started working and whatnot. And I like one of the quotes he has where he says that there aren't, you know, just a few people who can be good at math and, you know, science, and that they're just rare in their minds. Like, people can develop the practice of, you know, knowing these subject matters. It's just a matter of finding the tricks and practice that you need in order to kind of conceptualize and unlock those, unlock that knowledge. So this is his book. the print is quite small, and the page, I believe, was 411 pages long. Let's see if I'm incorrect. Let's see. It's 438 pages long, so this is quite the read, but I would imagine that it is a worthwhile read for anyone pursuing anything within the science realm, particularly the ones that are heavily based on math, like for example physics, or even though chemistry isn't really, yes it is, chemistry likes to pretend it's not based on math, but it really is. And what's another one? Well, obviously anything mathematical where you're pursuing a degree in math. So I said meth. So if you're interested in that, then this book would be the perfect choice for you. And I'll leave this to the side, but following this tangent, here is another selection. We have another biography. It is a book on Isaac Asimov, the writer of I, Robot, or the short stories that ended up composing the entire book of I, Robot, or the entire anthology, I guess, of I, Robot. He was also a scientist, and I believe he was a physicist as well. Let me just make sure. Isaac Asimov's boundless and inexhaustible intellectual curiosity and his extraordinary talent for explaining complex subjects in clear, concise prose is legendary to readers throughout the world. In addition to treating his devoted fans to nearly 500 illuminating science fiction and non-fiction books, he also found time to write a 3-volume autobiography. Now, these volumes have been condensed into one by Asimov's wife, Janet, who also shares excerpts from letters he wrote to her and shocking revelations about the illness that led to his death. More than being just an absorbing history of Isaac Asimov's life, It's Been a Good Life is like having an intimate conversation with the master himself. It doesn't specify whether or not he was a physicist, but I do believe he was a physicist. So, an astrophysicist, because he has a book where he explains how the cosmos works, so I believe he was an astrophysicist. Let me just double check in case I might be mistaken. But I don't see his, let's see. He was, of course, a writer, but what was his specialty in the science field? I can't find it, but this is also another interesting man. He has the same gift, Richard Feynman, who was the previous man that we discussed. Gift of explaining concepts, as it mentions, in ways where people can understand them and in ways where they don't feel belittled. So that is truly a remarkable and rare trait among people who are good at math and science, because more often than not they get more frustrated over the fact that other people don't understand what they're talking about, when in fact it's a difficult subject to understand, considering how math isn't something that we can just find in the normal world. It's a discovery that mankind has found, and so we have to make sure that people can understand that concept. They might be able to understand mathematical concepts and be able to work that out, but apparently they're kind of ignorant to the fact that it's a difficult subject, because it's something that we discovered and created in order to measure our world. And this is something that he understood, where he wasn't going to just throw out anyone's, interest in math over the, petty sake that their pride was hurt because someone made them feel stupid for not recognizing a study that was just created by mankind and still worked upon by mankind and still evolving. So I really do appreciate this man and Richard Feynman. These two men are definitely worth reading about their lives, especially if, of course, you're going into some sort of scientific specialty, especially physics or whatnot, or cosmology. Yeah, that's the study of, might be mistaken. Astrophysics, let's just say astrophysics. So, this would be a definitely recommended book, as well as the Richard Feynman biography for anyone going into that, or just interested in science and just wanting to hit the tip of the iceberg. So I'll leave this to the side, and let me just pick up this book that I knocked over. Actually, no, I'll pick up this book. This book eases quite well into this stream of consciousness where we're discussing science. So this book is by a writer named Douglas Adams. It was actually based on some radio broadcasts of a man who was chronicling his stories over the radio, but it wasn't actually written until he decided to write it. And so it's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's quite a funny book, to be honest. It's tongue-in-cheek way of explaining things that we already know, but in a different way, where it's from an outsider's point of view, or rather a futuristic point of view, is quite interesting. It's set right after the destruction of Earth, and it's honestly just a very goofy, witty, and cyclical sort of book where it kind of makes you think about things in a different way with like humor to it. It's really funny, to be honest. You should, if you like science fiction and also comedy, this is the best option for you. And there's also a movie based on this book starring Zoe Deschanel, Martin Freeman. Who else was in that movie? That one guy from Shaun of the Dead. And I mean, like the entire trilogy, to be honest. The one who starred as his stepfather. He's also, I think he plays like some sort of god in that movie. And it also has that one actor, I can't remember his name, but he was in The Green Mile and Galaxy Quest. He played Guy in Galaxy Quest. And the guy who admired Billy the Kid in The Green Mile, which is upsetting because I read that book and I can't remember his name. Nonetheless, it's definitely worth watching and definitely worth reading, so I'll leave that to the side as well. Now the book that I knocked over is, there we go, Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's. And this book is actually a bit darker in its context than the movie, because the movie seemed a bit more lighthearted. I don't know whether it's because of the time that it was being filmed, being the 60s, where, you know, people couldn't really stomach too much subject matter, or because they decided that it should be more lighthearted and that was going to be their take on the material. But this book is a little more darker in its material, as I already mentioned, and it is one of Truman Capote's works, so I would also recommend this. And if you're interested in finding out more about Truman Capote, there is a movie I know of starring Patrick Seymour Hoffman that's, you know, based on the life of Truman Capote. I think it's called Capote. I don't exactly know how honest, or rather as close to the truth it is to Truman Capote's life, especially since I don't think I've watched it. Maybe I watched like the first 20 minutes, can't quite recall, but there is a movie, so if you end up, you know, checking that out and, you know, reading reviews and, you know, hearing what other people have to say about it, and if it is well reviewed, then I guess you can watch that movie and then read this book so that you have that background knowledge on the author, or just read the author's biography, which I don't have in this bookstore, unfortunately. So yeah, let me just set this to the side. I'll leave these two masterpieces for last. Now, another selection we have that accompany one another. Let's see. There we go. And there we go. It is quite a controversial selection, considering how people don't really like the idea of absolute capitalism. But the books that I have here are Ayn Rand's Anthem and Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I don't have Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, but these books promote Ayn Rand's theory of, or rather philosophy of objectivity, strongly based on, well, not strongly based, but she is strongly influenced by Aristotle, who promoted logic in all regards. She really promotes capitalism, and she really promotes objectivity to a point where it doesn't benefit the worker, obviously, because she has this sort of mentality where it's like pure business is good for the society. I mean, that's a bit harsh, but it is nice to know that when it comes to Ayn Rand, she was a child during the Bolshevik Revolution, which was what happened in Russia after the fall of the Romanov line, where, you know, not the theocracy, the monarchy that fell ended up, you know, falling to communism, which was the first wave of communism. And so she had to experience communism at first hand, and the poverty and the starvation that happened as a result to it, and they had to escape because within the communist regime people were disappearing, and obviously her family was just like, we're not going to have anything to do with this, so she had to just run away. She ended up reaching America, or the United States, and here she ended up finding that, you know, the idea of capitalism was so freeing and there was so much freedom to it, and she just fell in love with the United States. So that's the reason why she clung on to capitalism so much, is just because of having that traumatic experience of experiencing such a strict and controlling and dangerous regime as was the communist regime in first wave. And I mean, even now, I mean, Cuba isn't doing all that well either. So that's why she's very passionate about capitalism and objectivity to a point where it's a little too extreme. So, I mean, the woman even believed that being in love is a selfish act, and that everyone is just inherently selfish, which I wouldn't really abide by, but once again, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And she did right. Atlas Shrugged is, I believe, 1,100 pages. I could be mistaken again, though. Let's see. No, it's almost 1,100 pages. It's 1,069 pages, and the print of it is quite fine, as you can note. The print is like fine print, basically, so it is quite an extensive read. It is difficult to read that in just one sitting, if it can be done. And this is Anthem, which is more like, let's see, this book is based on individualism. It says on the back, he lived in the dark ages of the future. In a loveless world, he dared to love the woman of his choice. In an age that had lost all trace of science and civilization, he had the courage to seek and find knowledge. But these were not the crimes for which he would be hunted. He was marked for death because he had committed the unpardonable sin. He had stood forth from the mindless human herd. He was a man alone. And then it ends up, reviewing over the book, saying Ayn Rand's classic tale of a future dark age of the great we, in which individuals have no name, no independence, and no values, anticipates her later masterpieces, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And so, let's see. This one is quite scratched out. So, this is the style of this one. It is quite short, to be honest. I mean, the writing is small, but so are the paragraphs and the amount of words listed on each, printed on each page. And the book length, compared to, Atlas Shrugged, is incredibly short at just, let's see, 253 pages. So, I think you should start off with this just to kind of have a, just to kind of get a feel for what Ayn Rand is promoting, and then read Atlas Shrugged, considering how that is quite a big book. It's a big book. Here, let me put this to the side. I'll put this right here. Now back to the classics, which shall lead quite nicely. Actually, no. I'll leave the classics for last. Or not for last, second to last. So I'll leave them there. This next book I have also not yet read. It is Frank McCourt's Angela's Ashes. So because I haven't read this, I'm probably just going to... Nope, it doesn't have anything there. Let's see. It's a memoir. This book is dedicated. And it's also considered a classic piece of literature, hence why I got it. But I have yet to find out anything about it, which really piques my interest, because that means that I'm just going to be going through this mysterious book to me, just trying to figure everything out. But let's see how long it is. It is 362 pages, and the word font size. The font size is reasonable, being just, what I would consider normal. Nothing too small, nothing too big. It's a normal font size. And it's 362 pages, so it should be an easy to read book. I mean, I would assume that depending on your reading schedule or reading pace, that it would take you, if you read 50 pages a day, it would take you a little over 7 days. But I mean, if you're only having 12 pages to read on the last day, then might as well just get those out of the way. That rhymed. So I'll leave that there. Unfortunately, I couldn't really advise you as to what it is about, so let me just, get that out of the way as fast as I can. This one I do know a bit about in background knowledge, but let me just... There we go. So, this book is called The Devil in the White City. This book is actually about H.H. Holmes and his reign of terror, even though that's a reference more fitting for Maximilien Robespierre, who was the leader of the French Revolution back in the day, but his reign of terror. And so, let's read the excerpt, or the introduction to this book, or the summary of this book. So, two men, each handsome and unusually adept at his chosen work, embodied an element of the great dynamic that characterized America's rush toward the 20th century. The architect was Daniel Hudson Burnham, the fair's brilliant director of works and the builder of many of the country's most important structures, including the Flatiron Building in New York and Union Station in Washington, D.C. The murderer was Henry H. Holmes, a young doctor who, in malign parody of the White City, built his World's Fair Hotel just west of the fairgrounds, a torture palace complete with dissection table, gas chamber, and 3,000-degree crematorium. Burnham overcame tremendous obstacles and tragedies as he organized the talents of Frederick Law Olmsted, Charles McKim, Louis Sullivan, and others to transform swampy Jackson Park into the White City, while Holmes used the attraction of the Great Fair and his own satanic charms to lure scores of young women to their deaths. What makes the story all the more chilling is that Holmes really lived, walking the grounds of that dream city by the lake. The Devil in the White City draws the reader into a time of magic and majesty, made all the more appealing by a sporting cast of real-life characters, including Buffalo Bill, Theodore Dreiser, Susan B. Anthony, Thomas Edison, Archduke... I think it might be on the other side of the book. That's what I thought. Archduke Francis Ferdinand, and others. In this book, the smoke, romance, and mystery of the Gilded Age come alive as never before. Erik Larson's gift as a storyteller are magnificently displayed in this rich narrative of the master builder, the killer, and the great fair that obsessed them both. So, I do believe this is going to be a great piece of fiction. I have yet read this. I have yet to read this, so it's something that I look forward to reading. In fact, actually, let me just do something. Okay, let me just do something really quickly. Just really quickly. I'm just going to put all the books I have not read in this pile, and all the books that I have read in this pile. And whichever books I put in the not read pile, you can't have. But the books that I put in the read pile, you can have. So let me just do that, okay? I don't know. Should I? No, I want to finish it, so I'll put Atlas Shrugged on that side, Anthem on that side, Angela's Ashes on that side, Breakfast at Tiffany's on this side, Hitchhikers on this side, his biography there. I'm still reading this one here. This one, Afternoon with an Author on this side, Great Gatsby here, Tales of the D'Urberville. Did I read this one? I'll put this over here just in case. Pamela Des Barres, I'm with the band here. Angels Dance and Angels Die here. Okay, so you can have this pile of books, but that pile of books is mine. So, you snooze, you lose. Now let me show you some more books you can't have, because it's going to ease well into a couple of books that you can have. Now, the Aeneid, Virgil, Homer's The Odyssey, and Homer's The Iliad, which are like, you know, each other's sequels and prequels. You have to read the Odyssey first and then the Iliad. So, yeah, it's the Odyssey first and then the Iliad. Let me see. Or was it the Iliad first and then the Odyssey? No, I think it's the Odyssey first and then the Iliad. Or was it the Iliad first and then the Odyssey? Odyssey, Iliad, Iliad, Odyssey, Odyssey, Iliad, Iliad, Odyssey. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, catch a tiger by the phone. Toe, if it hollers, let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. No, I think it's the Odyssey first. I could be mistaken. Just Google it. So, this one, I don't know what this one's about. The Aeneid by Virgil. It's just a classical novel, so if you want to educate yourself on the classics, this is a book to start with. And obviously you can't just not read Homer if you're going to get into the classics, because I mean, it's like, it's Homer. He is such a big player within the classics. It's like saying, I'm going to read Gothic fiction and not read Edgar Allan Poe. Like, nonetheless, you can't have these books either, because I'm going to be reading them. So, I'm going to leave these books over here, because these are my books, not your books. These are my books. My books. My books. they're my books, my books, my books, my books, my books. Let me just skapoosh. Pay no mind to the man behind the camera. Pay no mind behind the man behind the curtain. Yeah. Anyways, now let me bless you, because these last two book selections are blessings for you. Blessings. Blessings. I'm honestly like, I need a drum roll, but I can't have a drum roll right now. It's just too much. Too much. Far too much. Yeah. These beautiful novels, just too beautiful. Just too beautiful to just be thrown like that. But listen, these are both by the same author, a new author within my collection. Her name is Donna Tartt. This one is called The Secret History, and then the next one is called The Goldfinch. With this book, which was her first published book that she wrote during her time at Bennington College, she illustrates the life of her protagonist named Richard Papin. And Richard Papin is a boy on a scholarship going to a university where he's studying medicine, but then he ends up changing into the classics because he's very interested in that. And he's interested in a group of kids who are the only kids selected to study the classics, since the major is highly, highly selective, considering how there's only one teacher who only chooses like a good handful of students. The other students, Henry Winter, Camilla and Charles, what's their last name? Camilla and Charles, and Francis Abernathy. Yeah, it's the four of them. It's four of them. Yeah. So, they end up living out their dream of, adopting the Greek lifestyle by paying tribute to Dionysus, and it ends up getting them into a lot of trouble. It is revealed early on that this is Bunny. Bunny's the other one. Bunny. This is revealed to be a murder mystery book, even though it's not really all that much of a mystery in regards to who did it, because early in the book it's revealed that Bunny is murdered and the other kids, did it, but it's a question of how and why was he murdered. So it's more a mystery as to what exactly happened for best friends to kill their best friend. So it is quite, for lack of a better term, a delicious and riveting and interesting and tantalizing novel. You just can't help flipping to the next page. It's truly amazing. Like, the language, the prose, everything about it is just, it's just so full and whole, and it's just amazing. Like, it really immerses you within the tale. And she also references a lot of outside books and knowledge and writers and whatnot, which is great, because it is nice to be referred to other writers and other literature, because that way you're exposed to the world of literature. And so the books that she mentions here, which I do have a list of, she ends up mentioning, let's see, Untimely Meditations by Friedrich Nietzsche, Epigraph, Republic, Book 2 by Plato, Epigraph, Tom Swift by Victor Appleton, Paradise Lost by John Milton, Goodbye Columbus by Philip Roth, The New Testament, the Bible, Agamemnon by Achilles, Orestia by Achilles, Inferno by Dante, Poetics by Aristotle, the Iliad by Homer, which you're not gonna get. So, sorry, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but that's how life is. Read the book, you'll learn about it. You'll learn about the unfairness in life. I can't pronounce that. Bacchae. Bacchae by Euripides, Parmenides by Plato, who was he was an original philosopher, I believe, predating Socrates. So it's like one of those sort of like, the same way Plato brought Socrates to life, he's also bringing Parmenides to life. I don't know if his works survived, but I guess he's doing the same thing, because Socrates doesn't have any works. The only reason we know about Socrates is because of Plato's works, but I think he does the same thing with Parmenides. and Euripides, but I don't know, because Euripides kind of, was it Euripides? No, no, no. It was one that started with an H. I forgot the name of him. Heraclides, that's his name. Heraclides. But, Heraclides, yeah, they were all, I think they all predate Socrates, so yeah. Anyways, predate him, yeah, they predate him. They predate him. They date him before they predate him. They date him before they date him, yeah. And so, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which you can have. Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Rover Boys by Edward, that's Stratemeyer. Journey from Chester to London by Thomas Pennant. The Club History of London by, who knows? The Pirates of the Penzance by W.S. Gilbert. Bobbsey Twins by Laura Lee Hope. Marino Faliero by Lord Byron. The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which we also have within the bookstore. I just didn't pick it out. But if you find it, you can buy that one. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert, which we also have, so feel free to buy it. Memoirs by Duc de Saint-Simon. Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. Othello by Shakespeare, which we also have. Feel free to buy it if you can find it. The World Book Encyclopedia, Men of Thought Indeed by E. Tipton Chatsford. Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells is such a great writer. I have to actually read up on his works. Or not a writer, but like a great thing. Like, he came up with a lot of ideas that were very interesting, like time travel and obviously the Invisible Man. Like, my goodness, he was a man before his time. But anyways, like, I love Victorian literature. Like, they lived in such a terrible time, but they were, I mean, like, not really, because they were the first generation to not have a disease plague them, but at the same time, like, it's still such a crappy society to live in because women were very restricted. You know, Jack the Ripper was at large. It was just, and not to mention industrialism. No one really knew how to rein that in, so it wasn't the greatest thing, but the literature and the art coming out of it was just, oh my god, thank you. Like, at least we have that great work of art, or that great body of work of art. Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Couldn't Grow Up by J.M. Barrie. There is a movie called Finding Neverland starring Johnny Depp, which is another controversial figure, which is like, oh, did you? But anyways, he stars in the movie, and it talks about, you know, it's fictional, of course, but, I mean, it's not really completely fictional, but it's not 100% sticking to the truth. But it basically kind of says, you know, this is how Peter Pan, the story, came about. The Divine Comedy by Dante, Superman comics, the Upanishads, Perry Mason novels by Earl Stanley Gardner, With Through My Heart Is Laden by A.E. Housman, Lycidas by John Milton, The Charge of the Light Brigade by Alfred Lord Tennyson, In Flanders Fields by John McCrae, Corpus of Mycenaean Inscriptions from Knossos, Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, which we also have, so feel free to get it if you end up finding it in the bookstore. The White Devil by John Webster, which is, nope, not that one. The Devil in the White City, that's the name of the book. And The Broken Heart by John Ford, Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe, The Revenger's Tragedy by Cyril Turner, Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens. We do have a couple of works by Charles Dickens, but I don't believe we have Our Mutual Friend. I think we have Twin Cities. I can't remember their names. Great Expectations we have, but the Twin Cities one. Twin Cities. I can't remember the full title, and I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to say it. But anyways, the authors mentioned are J.R.R. Tolkien, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, Alfred Douglas, Robert de Montesquieu, Plato, Homer, Dante, Virgil, Plotinus, Marie Corelli, Shakespeare, Alexander Pope, John Donne, Rupert Brooke, who was a very attractive young poet. But I think he had an untimely death in a boat where, I think he died from an illness on a boat. I think it was from being a soldier. I can't quite remember, but he had untimely death, Rupert Brooke. Edgar Allan Poe, Hegel, Raymond Chandler, Gregory of Tours, Thomas Aquinas. He's a priest, a philosopher. It's P.G. Wodehouse, George Orwell, Harold Acton, Salman Rushdie, that's my last name, Agatha Christie, Proust, John Webster, Thomas Middleton, Cyril Turner, John Ford, Christopher Marlowe, Walter Raleigh, Thomas Nash. So, yeah, those are the authors mentioned in this book and the books mentioned in this book, read it. Just do yourself a favor and read it. It is so good. It is so good. Like, I'm still not over how good this book is. It is too good. Just too good. But then again, it kind of services my interests. But still, it's just too good. Like, if you're interested in the classics and, you know, dark academia, it is a worthwhile read. Like, oh my god. And then the Goldfinch. The Goldfinch can be dark, but not as dark, because that one was a bit... I mean, it's not anything horrific or otherworldly, but I mean, like, it's a little darker than this one, in my opinion. Now, with this one, it follows the life of a little boy whose mother dies in an explosion and who ends up finding this painting called the Goldfinch, who was painted by a painter who also died in an explosion. So it's like real life is mirroring art, because this book is a work of art. Like, it won the Pulitzer Prize and everything. It's a work of art, just like The Secret History is. And Donna Tartt also has another book called The Little Friend, and she has another work. It's The Little Friend. There's another one that I'm missing. I think she has 4 published works so far. She publishes a work like every 10 years. It's truly sad, but at the same time, it's easy to catch up with what she's writing. And the books are also quite long. Like, The Secret History, I believe, was 521 pages. I don't really feel like looking back into it, but it's somewhere around there, 521, 526. This one, I believe, is 740. No, 771. Let's see. 771, yep. So, this is about a little boy who finds a painting who, on the day that his mother dies, because they're at an art museum, there's an explosion, a terrorist attack on the art museum. He ends up, you know, finding himself in a pile of rubble with a painting right there. You know, an old man named Welty ends up telling him that he should take that painting, take this ring, take it to a friend of his named Howie, who will take, you know, eventually, you know. But he needs to take those 2 things, and then he ends up finding out that his mother's dead, and then, you know, his life as an orphan kind of continues on, or a relative orphan at that time. You know, his father was still alive and in the picture, but he ran off to Las Vegas with, you know, someone, and he was basically considered an orphan since they couldn't locate his father. And then they ended up, you know, but I mean, it's a 771 page book. There's plenty of things that happen, so. And it's not anything like a linear sort of like story. Like, it's something that goes all over the place. Like, it's not something just following one narrative. It's something that's like just life as it unfolds, basically. And that's something that's beautiful about her novels, is that there is no purpose, there is no exact point which the story has to reach, except for The Secret History. But that point is just that Bunny needs to be killed, and that's it. That's just a fixed point within it. Same thing with, you know, this book. The boy had to grab the Goldfinch. There had to be something like revolving the Goldfinch, but there is no, you don't know exactly what's going to be happening. The story is not predictable, and that's what's glorious about these novels. I don't have a list of books that this book references, but there are plenty of artists that are referenced within this novel. So if you're someone who's interested in art, then it is quite interesting to have that sort of like art history and artist mentionings kind of there, because it's like, oh, I know that one, oh, I know that one, oh, I know that one, and it's like, it's just so invigorating. It's like kind of like the writer and you are having like this sort of like gushing over literature and art, and it's like you're both kind of like, yes, oh my god, I like this too, but at the same time you're also reading a great work of art. So not only are you gushing over artists and writers that you like, but you're also reading a new writer that is just amazing, flawless in my opinion, one of my favorites. It's just but anyways, let me just pull up the stack of books that you might be interested in. So, here's The Goldfinch, The Secret History, the biographies on Jim Morrison and Pamela Corson, Pamela DeBar, Great Gatsby, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany. So, out of this stack, what would you like? Okay. All of them. Fantastic choice. That'll be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. That will be $28. Yes, I will accept charge. So there you go. Let me just slide that over, and then you can just, you know, slide the card right there.